Hello, everyone. Welcome to our latest interview in our Psych in Real Life interview series. Today, we're speaking with Life Coach Layla Naji, and she's sharing her perspective and some helpful tips and coping skills of how to manage and balance our personal lives, professional lives, and if you're a parent, the adjustments with our kids having distance learning. If you're new to our channel, be sure to subscribe to stay up to date with our weekly videos on mental health related topics and helpful coping skills for you to apply in your own everyday lives. My name is Gabriel Arroyo, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist located in Southern California. All right, welcome to our latest interview in our Psych in Real Life interview series. We are with Life Coach Layla Naji. Layla, do you mind introducing yourself to everyone, please?
Of course. Hi, Gabriel. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
So my name is Layla Naji, and I am a life coach, and you might wonder what that is and how you become one. I actually have a master's degree in psychology with a concentration in marriage and family therapy. And being a therapist is a wonderful job, but it also comes with lots of rules and restrictions and regulations about who you can work with and lots of details that you have to follow under the licensing requirements. And one of the things that you can't do as a licensed therapist is work with people within your community or people that you know or you might have other relationships with. So the benefit of working as a life coach for me is that I can actually have clients whom I may have met before, whom we may have mutual friends, people who are, for example, children of my friends. Sometimes you want somebody who you are familiar with, that you feel safe and comfortable with. And so operating as a life coach takes away a lot of those restrictions that being a licensed therapist has, and allows me to be out there and do a lot in the community. And it really opens up a lot of doors and allows me to reach people that maybe otherwise would be a little intimidated by the term therapist.
Wow. Yeah, I love it. I love it. Thank you for breaking down that explanation of what a life coach is. And yeah, as Layla mentioned, me being a licensed marriage and family therapist, I am regulated by our state board, which governs a lot of rules. Like Layla mentioned, dual relationships. So I couldn't do therapy in a professional capacity with somebody that is one or two or even three levels of relationships with me. So a friend of a friend, or even like my family's friends, then I have to kind of look at very specific rules and regulations with that. And then there's also kind of the intimacy factor of it has to stay very professional. For example, like with my clients, I don't engage with them in social media. I have a social media policy, things like that. Whereas Layla, as a life coach, wouldn't be governed by those rules. So thank you so much for clarifying what a life coach is.
Of course.
So tell us about your work and what you do in your practice as a life coach.
So I actually wear a lot of hats. Life coach is one of them. I'm also a psychology professor at the University of Laverne, and I've been a teacher in a previous life, as it were, everything from elementary school all the way up to the graduate level. And I'm also a certified parent educator for positive discipline. So the common theme between all of those different things is that basically I try to help people when life becomes difficult, situations become challenging, relationships need, some little extra outside input maybe. And so all of those things basically have the common theme of I try to help people with life. I know I need that help, and it's just an opportunity to try and give back, whether it's with small children, whether it's relationships, whether it's parenting, which none of us were ever given a manual for. I'm a parent. I try to figure it out every day. So I try to take all of those skills from my education as well as my personal experiences and additional trainings that I've done to just help people when they find themselves hit a challenging situation.
Yeah, I love it. We talked a little bit about the specifics and kind of regulations with the board and not having a board with life coaching, and you explained a little bit right now with your practice. Would you say that your approach is similar to therapy, or how would you say your approach is different than traditional therapy?
I think it's very similar in a lot of ways, in the sense that I really try to adhere to the same requirements of confidentiality.
Mm,
You know, I really give my clients the same speech, as it were, that I would as a therapist, in that everything that stays between us stays in the room, except for the reportable exceptions to confidentiality, which if you've been to therapy, you would know what they are, you know, the things that you're
mm,
legally required to report.
mhm, mhm,
And so, in terms of being a professional and really keeping my clients' confidence, it's definitely something that is very similar and very close to being a licensed therapist. And then, different than that would be that, as you said, I can assist clients in situations that perhaps a therapist wouldn't be able to be present. If there is an important event that one of my clients has that they feel they need me to be there, such as a graduation, for example, or even a wedding, or some event that might be anxiety provoking or difficult to
mm,
navigate, it wouldn't be a taboo issue for me to be there as a life coach in the same way that it would as a therapist. Again, I can have interactions with their children, with their family members.
mm,
As a therapist, you can't see two members of a couple, you know, individually, but as a
mm,
life coach, sometimes if I'm seeing a couple or a family together, sometimes individuals just want to talk about something privately, or they want to run a conversation by me that they're going to have with a family member, and kind of
mm.
role play it or troubleshoot it before they go ahead and dive in. They're looking for the right communication skills, the right phrasing. So that really gives me all of that room to help in these different ways without those limitations.
Gotcha, gotcha. Would you say that, in this channel and in a lot of the YouTube videos that I do, we talk about like coping skills. We haven't really talked about like theories and theoretical modalities like CBT, DBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, or dialectical behavioral therapy. But would you say like those elements are still the same in life coaching?
I think they definitely do come up in the same way, because I have the educational background. And so
Hmm.
I've learned all of these theories. I've used them with clients along the way when I've been working as an intern therapist. And so I'm very much a believer of finding out what your client needs as an individual, rather than coming in with a predetermined idea that this is the theory that will work on everyone. So I
Hmm.
very much take from different theories and apply as necessary to the situation. But I think having that educational background and that knowledge really solidifies and helps me to create an appropriate and effective treatment plan for my clients.
Great. I love it. I love it. Yeah. Thank you so much for explaining that. Well, we're meeting via Zoom because of essentially the state of the world right now with COVID-19, the current global pandemic. So I know, which I've expressed in a lot of videos that I've done, it's definitely affected my practice. I'm doing everything through telemedicine and telehealth, just seeing people virtually. How has the current pandemic affected you and your practice?
I think it has had both positive and negative effects. And so the positive ones would be that people like you and I are lucky enough that we can still do our jobs. We can still
Hmm.
see clients. And in some ways, it gives us more flexibility. For me as a parent, I don't necessarily have to worry about childcare, or, finding somewhere to be able to take my children in order for me to go and see a client.
Hmm. Hmm.
This way, I can set them up with an activity, let them go wild with screen time, while I go to work, and it's fine. I don't have to leave my home. And so I can work maybe hours that I usually wouldn't be able to due to the
Hmm.
restrictions of being a parent.
Hmm.
So that's been very positive, and just the ability to continue doing this is definitely a blessing. In terms of negatively, a lot of people do miss that one-on-one, face-to-face interaction.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so some clients do struggle more with that than others would. And also, sometimes it's difficult to set boundaries, because you can be available all the time and at any time. And so it's really up to you to set yourself a schedule that is realistic and achievable, and to not say yes to every client who wants, a session. Maybe somebody wants a really late night session, or somebody wants a
Yeah.
weekend session, and people kind of know you're not really going anywhere. And so they kind of could possibly be a little bit more demanding of your time. So I think, I recently saw a meme on the internet that had a picture of somebody working at a desk with a laptop, and it said, do I live at home, or do I live at work, or do I work from home? And it's like, interesting, and I think this has been one of the things of setting boundaries. Just because we can do work from home doesn't mean we should be doing it all the time. We have to create that separation.
Yeah, I love it. That's a great point. And definitely I would recommend to take that to heart for all of our viewers. Is boundaries are super important. I know that happens to me a lot, where I get asked, if I can, and there's nothing wrong with asking. Of course, please, by all means, I encourage all my clients to express their needs and wants, but it's also for my best interest and my own self-care that I set those boundaries of saying, no, these are my days off. And, I say the same thing with my partner, is telling or letting them know to set their boundaries with their employer, and just, these are my work times, and that's it.
With technology, it's wonderful because we're all accessible all the time, whether it's through an email or a text message, or so it's easy to just constantly be replying to people right the second that you get a message. If you happen to be on your phone, and then one text message could lead into going down that rabbit hole of doing a bunch of other things. So I think it is really important for us to, our schedules don't have to look the same. It doesn't mean we need to be doing a 9 to 5, but it's just like creating what works for you, and also being consistent with it, I think, And that's difficult sometimes, but at the end of the day, you can't help people if you are depleted of energy and you are spreading yourself too thin. So it's important to hold on to those boundaries.
Definitely. Well put. So you mentioned being a mom. So we have this COVID-19 pandemic, we have our work life, our personal life, and you being a mother, like, how are you balancing all of this?
Am I balancing it? That's the question. It depends on what day you're asking me. But it is difficult as a parent. And I think it doesn't matter whether it's, a mother or a father or a grandparent, whoever is the main caregiver to children in the home. I think we have been stretched really thin. And it's been really tough because it isn't only about your physical duties as the main caregiver. I mean, obviously there is the day-to-day things of feeding and laundry and housework and education and things like that. But it's also, there's a lot emotionally that our children are going through. So being able to be sensitive to their needs, their different moods, their different emotions. We talk a lot about how we might be processing this time of staying at home and isolating, and children don't necessarily show or verbalize these things, but that I feel like is a job by itself of kind of checking in with how they're doing emotionally and mentally. And if I'm honest, some days are better than others. At the beginning, there was this excitement when we first started staying home together of like, this is so great, I'll probably never get a chance to have this much one-on-one time with my children, so let me make the most of it. And I went into overactive Martha Stewart crafty mother Pinterest type mode, but that can only last so long. And I learned, as the time went on, that I was overdoing it, overscheduling our days. And I thought that I was doing the right thing by keeping them occupied every second of the day so they wouldn't be missing their friends, they wouldn't be missing school. But I'm just one person and I can't replace those things for them. And it's important to let them have those feelings, to let them miss their friends and talk about it, to let them express that they miss school, they miss their outside activities. So, I learned to tone it down both for them so they could find their own creative skills and fill their own time, and also to tone it down for myself because it was becoming overwhelming.
Yeah, definitely. I love that perspective that you shared of allowing them to just feel. I think that a lot of parents and even professionals like myself are looking at of like, okay, well, let's look at these strategies and coping skills to get our mind off of it. But you're right. Sometimes you have to steer into the skid, and and have compassion for ourselves and our children and family that, hey, this sucks, right? This sucks for all of us. You're allowed to feel that way.
Yeah, I think sometimes, the term toxic positivity is thrown around a little bit on the internet. And I think what that means to me is when somebody does complain about something or express a negative feeling, we always take the approach of, well, things could always be worse, at least you have a this and at least you have a that. And I think we need to stop doing that sometimes. It doesn't
Mm,
mean if we are upset, if we are stressed, if we're frustrated, it doesn't automatically mean that we're ungrateful. That's
mm,
just what we're feeling at that moment. And of course, there's always somebody who is in a worse situation, but we're not trying to compete with each other here. All of
mhm,
our feelings are valid, all of our pain is valid, all of our stress is valid. And whether you're a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, an 80-year-old, we're all experiencing challenges. And I think it is important to, for even us as parents, we think we need to look like we have it all together. We think that
mm,
our children feel safe if we look like everything is perfect, but I think it sets up an unrealistic and unhealthy example for them. They need to
mm,
see that we're human and we can break down and we can have bad days. And I definitely had some of those. My parents live in the UK, and they're getting older, and we usually go and spend a couple of months with them in the summer, and we couldn't do that. We had to cancel that
mm,
trip. And I had my dad's birthday, and he's in his late 70s, and it
mm,
was very difficult. And the kids saw me being very emotional. I cried that day, and they stepped up and they took care of
mm.
me, and they gave me extra hugs and kisses, and
Oh,
they stepped in and took on that role of cheering me up, and
mm,
thinking of ideas of things we could reach out and do for their grandfather that would make him feel
mm,
special. So I think it's really important for us to show these different emotions that we feel to our children, because it normalizes it for them, and they realize they don't always have to be cheerful and happy for us to love and accept them.
yeah, I love that. Oh, your kids are so sweet.
They really are. They really are. Ask me tomorrow and we'll see if you get the same answer.
I love that example. That's so beautiful. And I think that, yeah, we're all experiencing that. We're all grieving some sort of adjustment due to this current pandemic. So thank you for sharing that. And I'm sorry that you didn't get to spend that celebration with your father.
Yeah, it's difficult, but again, we're lucky we have things like FaceTime, and we have been able to like find little games that the kids can play with them over video chat
Mm,
and stuff. So it helps you go to that extra bit of creativity and imagination of, what can I do to
mhm,
connect? And I know even without having to think internationally, there's a lot of people who, for example, I have an autoimmune condition and so does my husband. And so we've been extra careful, and
mhm,
maybe more careful than friends that we know, about where we go and what we do. And we really don't go anywhere. He has since returned back to work, and there's this whole protocol when he comes home of like changing the clothes and showering and all of this before he comes into contact with anybody.
mm,
But
mhm,
I know lots of people whose parents live a mile or two away, but because they're elderly or because of different pre-existing conditions, they still can't have contact. And so coming up with these ways to virtually connect, it's really cute to see our elderly parents and grandparents figuring out this technology. Sometimes they send us these funny selfies or pictures they've accidentally taken. So I think they're challenging themselves, and we're all learning through this time.
mhm, mhm. Yeah. My mom would hate me for saying this, but she's not considered an elder, but she has a hard time with technology, and she
Yeah.
hates doing the video stuff like this. So
Mhm.
I love the example of, yeah, it's hard for some people, even me.
Yeah.
I'm fairly young, I think, and I should know how to use the technology. But even for us, like starting up this Zoom call, we're like, hey, we're not able to see each other. Yeah,
Definitely.
it's different. It's difficult.
But I think it's
Uh,
good, it reminds us, like, I am really not a technology person. I never want to do the updates on my phone. I don't want any of my apps to look different. I'm comfortable. I'm fine. It works. But this is pushing us, and it's really,
mm,
I think this whole experience has kind of helped us to realize that we can do more difficult things than we imagined, and we can cope
mm,
with more things. You know,
yes.
most people I know I actually, by choice, a few years ago, decided to homeschool my kids for a year. At that time, they were in first and third grade, and they're getting ready to
Mm.
go to sixth and eighth grade this year. And
Wow.
so many people turned around to me and said, why would you want to do that? You're never going to get a break. I could never cope with this. And
Mm.
now we're all kind of in that place. And
Yeah.
so many people have said to me, I surprised myself. I didn't think I'd be able to do it. I didn't think my kids
Mhm.
would listen to me. I didn't think I could cope with the distance learning. There have been so many things that I think, some barriers that we've broken within ourselves. We have these psychological limitations of what I can and can't cope with. And
Mhm.
being forced into a situation like this really makes you have to break through those. And I think we can all look at it as a learning and growth opportunity that we can handle difficult challenges.
Definitely, definitely. I think that that's perfectly said. You mentioned your kids are in school and doing distance learning, I assume now. And then we have the telework. How are you keeping all these things separate? And I assume, right now while we're recording, I have somebody working on the backyard. So I'm hearing some noise. I'm like, oh my gosh, is the camera picking it up? But that's real life right now. We're balancing kind of our personal life and our business life. How are you keeping things separate, or if they kind of do cross paths, how are you adjusting to that?
Every day looks really different. Like if you walk into my house right now, my kids do their Zoom karate in the kitchen because that's the biggest space that we have.
Mm.
They can move the kitchen table and things like that. So the kitchen has become a dojo. It is also a classroom because we use the kitchen table to do all of their schoolwork and things like that. And sometimes when I see clients, I'm in this room, and sometimes I sit in my car. Because if my husband is home and I want to ensure complete confidentiality, then I
Mhm.
go sit in the car and it becomes my virtual office. So it's really
Mhm.
about making whatever you have work for you. None
Mhm.
of us, or at least most of us, don't have the luxury of having a designated room to be the classroom for our children or a designated room to be our home office. Many of us are just sharing space, trying to make it work, sharing devices even. You can have
Mhm.
the laptop at this time and you can have the iPad at that time. So it's difficult. It definitely is. But again, I think the scheduling and being mindful of everybody's needs and responsibilities and trying to have somewhat of a plan. Sometimes I feel a little bit careful when I say the word schedule because I think
Mhm.
it's really important for people to be flexible with those schedules. Sometimes
Mhm.
when, as I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the stay-at-home order, I had the day extremely scheduled. And if I didn't do everything on the list, I felt somehow like we hadn't achieved everything that we needed to that day, or that somehow I had failed. And I realized
Mhm.
that it's not about that. It's a guideline to help you have some structure in your day, but definitely be flexible. If we need to abandon everything and sit and watch a movie as a family, because that's what we need to do, if we need to step out and get some fresh air, everything can wait. So I think it's about being flexible and making do with the resources that you have. And since we're all
Mhm.
in the same boat, I've never had a client say, oh, I'd rather not speak to you while you're in your car, or, is there somewhere else you can go? Or even sometimes if
Mhm.
they hear my children in the background who are downstairs dancing or singing or playing, it's fine. They have the same thing going on too. And I think it's actually brought us all closer together, and it's a way that we can all relate to each other.
Wow. Yeah, I love that. That's a great example, and thank you for sharing that. Um, I hear a lot from my clients that are struggling with the school part. Do you have any insight as a parent of how you're helping your children? Or I think the biggest complaint that I hear from the clients that I see is they're not equipped. They don't know how or what to do for their children to help them with school. And I think that a lot of parents feel that their schools weren't prepared or set them up for success. Do you have any advisement or anything that's worked for you, or any helpful tips or pointers?
It's interesting because I'm looking at this from many perspectives. So I'm looking at it as a parent who is going to have children who are next week going to start their distance learning. I'm also looking at it as a teacher who has worked with children of various ages for many years. So I have that perspective. And then I have my own teaching that I'm going to do for some graduate classes at Laverne virtually for the first time. So there's lots of different angles that I'm looking at this from. And what I would say mainly to parents, both as a mother and as a teacher, is that it's important to remember that this is new for everybody. So I even have some clients that are actually teachers, and they are feeling the same stress and the same anxiety and worry to perform well and to meet the students' needs in the same way that parents are too. So what I would say, my best advice that I try to tell myself and I've been telling others, is to really remember that it's not going to be perfect. There are going to be many technical glitches, you know, to really sit down with your kids and have a conversation and remind them that this is new for everybody. They don't need to feel like they have it handled. You don't need to feel like you have it handled. To have patience and grace with the teachers and the educators that are trying to figure this out for us, and with yourself and your children. You know, I think we all have to really practice kindness and practice patience, and to remember that it's not the end of the world if today's lesson go through, or I couldn't log on to this. You know, our children are not going to get so far behind in life because of a few months of disrupted learning. This is giving them an invaluable set of skills, life skills, that no textbook can give them. You know, learning the resiliency. I'm a big believer in non-traditional teaching, you know, and I try to, even when I'm in the classroom, whether it's younger kids or older kids, I try to kind of take what life lessons we can learn from things. And textbooks are not going to tell you about learning to manage your time at home or learning to be resilient and try again the next day. I think that this is an educational experience in and of itself, and it's nothing to do with equations or theories, you know, it's nothing to do with spelling and grammar, but it is definitely a set of skills that in 5 years' time and in 10 years' time, our kids will have skills that they otherwise wouldn't if they didn't go through this experience.
Wow, very well said. Amazing point. Amazing point. That resilience factor, and that we're learning just invaluable skills. You know, for you shared about your adjustments to your career and personal life, and then I've shared as well through this channel is I never thought I would do a YouTube channel. I had no interest whatsoever, but this has stretched me to be more active and engaged through social media and to have a bigger outreach to help the community. So I think you're right. Resilience and adjustment to a very abnormal situation.
Yeah. And I think, you know, that ability to be flexible and go with the flow, you know, you may or may not know about me that I have a tendency to be a bit of a control freak. You know, and I'm learning to let go of that, because you don't know, you can't predict what things are coming next for you. And as an entire, you know, global community, we have learned that we can have plans and we can schedule things, and unexpected things happen. And obviously this is a huge, exaggerated, you know, global example that we're all living through. But even with kids, you know, sometimes they're learning that they have expectations, or they think that something's going to happen and it might not. And that ability to be flexible and go in a different direction, and like you say, stretch yourself beyond the abilities or the interests that you thought you had, it's really a unique experience. And I think that while I'm not trying to say that it's easy, and I know that many people have been affected financially, you know, have been affected in terms of their health, and a lot of people really are in crisis. So I don't want to make it sound like I'm being unrealistic and saying, look at this lovely growth experience. No, of course, you know, but in terms of trying to take the good out of it that we can, I think young and old, we're all being kind of pushed to a degree that maybe we would have been hesitant and stayed in our comfort zone, and we can't do that. So we have to kind of make some moves that we wouldn't before.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I just want to take a moment. Like, I appreciate how you break all these things down. And for our viewers, like, as you could tell, there's different approaches from everybody in the professional capacities that I bring for the interviews. And you could see that it's very comforting from you, Layla. Like, I love the way you break things down, and it's very affirming and comforting and relatable. And I think that that's amazing. And I appreciate that skill that you have as a life coach and paraprofessional. I think it's amazing. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And I appreciate you saying that. And I think this is really the time that this is where we all need to be there, being vulnerable with each other, reaching out and saying when we need help or when we're having a bad day. And, we previously had and still are to a certain extent, we often are being competitive with people on social media, or we're seeing these unrealistic examples of what our day should look like, whether it's as a parent or as a professional. We see these people who look like they have everything together, and nobody does. And I think this is allowing us to really stop and be honest and all share our struggles. And if we really can reach out and be kinder to ourselves, be kinder to each other, we can create such a community of support that hopefully is not going to be around just for the pandemic, but will go on in the future.
Yes, yes. I hope so. I hope so. So, we're talking about the balance, and you gave some examples of how you're balancing and some tips for parents with balancing the home life and school life. So let's talk a little bit more about the personal stuff of how you're taking care of yourself and your own self-care. What are you doing?
Okay, so this is one of my weak points, if I'm really honest. I'm really good at helping people do this, but I'm a very difficult person to practice what I preach. So, and also my husband works extremely long hours. So a lot of the time the kids will go to sleep and they haven't seen him that night. So it really is me, all day. So it's difficult for me to step away and kind of make that time for myself. But I notice that if I don't, I become a less of a quality parent because I am stressed, I am tired, I am less likely to be patient, I am more likely to be snappy and irritable. And it isn't really fair for me to kind of misdirect all of those feelings and take them out on my kids. And we all do it as parents. We all yell, we all scream, we all, have those days when we're not performing to the best of our abilities. And that's okay. Just like our kids have bad days, we have bad days. But I have the added element of having a health condition. And so some days I don't have a choice. Some days I literally can't get out of bed and do anything for a number of hours. And because this has been something that's been present in my life for many years, my children are used to that. And it's really sweet because as much as I would rather not have them experience this, it's also built a level of compassion in them where they come and take care of me. They bring me their little stuffed animals and put them next to me in the bed, and they make me tea, and it's very sweet, and I'm grateful for the fact that they're able to be patient and empathetic, and until I'm ready to kind of join them again. But what I've learned is also, if I don't set an example for my kids of self-care, then I'm really doing them an injustice as a parent, because I'm sending them the message that you have to put everybody before yourself, and you have to take care of everybody else, and you have to sacrifice your own needs and well-being. And I would not want that for them. There are definitely moments as a parent where I would rather do it. I would take everything on myself, but I don't want them to learn that. And we all know that kids learn what they see much more than they hear. So I could tell them these things all day long, but if they see me just go, 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 then that's what they're going to learn as an example of what to do. And so what I try to do is implement quiet time. Sometimes it's pre-scheduled, where I'll let them know, tomorrow I have to work at this time, and I might either set them up with an activity, they may have a virtual call with a friend themselves, or I'll just, let them have screen time. It's, sometimes it's like saying a bad word when parents say, I let my kids use the iPad, and it's okay. Nobody is saying put your kid in front of a screen and turn them into a zombie for 24 hours, a day. But I think it's also like taking the pressure and guilt off of ourselves as parents. Like sometimes ahead of time you need to get something done. And some days something hits you out of nowhere where you're just a little more fragile that day and you just need to take some time. So for me, I love to read. I love my Netflix, certain shows where I just want to disconnect and not think about anything in the world. I try to limit my news and social media use because I notice that the more I consume that, the more anxiety I feel. Because you're looking at all of the statistics and all of the new cases of COVID and all of the different risks, and you're getting all this conflicting information about what is right for your kids and your family and what is the safest way to do things. And the more I go down that direction, the less well and healthy and resilient I feel. It really affects me. So I had to make a conscious effort to not consume news media and social media so much. That's one of the things that I do. I've also given my children more responsibility, which again, as a bit of a control freak mom, has been difficult. They are at the age where they are able to be safe in the kitchen. So every now and again, maybe once or twice a month, they will be in charge of making dinner. And I just leave it alone. I'm not micromanaging. I'm not like peeking over like, oh, the disaster in the kitchen. And they've impressed me, they've impressed me as to what they can handle, and they've impressed themselves. And so, I would say that self-care, sometimes when we think about it, we think of things like getting a massage or working out, or, there's a list of sort of very accepted and traditional things that fit under that category. But I think it's really about what you need at the time for yourself. So if I need to talk to a friend for 20, 30 minutes to chat and vent, then I'll do that. If I need to not do any cooking or cleaning that day, then I'll delegate it to someone else or ask for help when I can. If I need to just take a nap or read a book, I think it can look different. I feel like somehow, even with self-care, we think we have to do it a certain way for it to be effective. But I think it's really listening to yourself, what you need. If I need to call my husband and say, is there any way you can come home earlier today because I'm done, or they miss you, they need you. So it's really just finding out what works for you, what works for your family, what will make you feel better in that given moment. And it doesn't matter what anybody else's self-care looks like. It just has to be effective for you.
I love it. That was great. Great definition of self-care. We talk about self-care a lot in the channel and we give various examples, but I think you nailed it. The key word in self-care is self, right? Self. So you're absolutely right. It's what you need at that given time. I love it. As far as coping skills go, is there anything that would be helpful or you would recommend to anybody watching?
I think, the things that we have been talking about and using both in my family and in my practice is a lot of communication and trying to verbalize to family members or even bosses or coworkers, the limits that you have. So for example, at home with my children, I've encouraged them to let me know when they need time alone. We sometimes forget that children need alone time also. And being together constantly all the time, while technically and conventionally we think of it as a wonderful thing, and it is, it's also really difficult, and you do get tired of each other and you get on each other's nerves. And I've expressed to them that it's okay to say, I need a timeout, so they'll grab a book, they'll find a corner, they'll go up to their room, or we have a little we invested like $20 into these cute little camping tents, those little play tents. And when they just feel like they need that space, they just go in there, they take a book or whatever it might be and kind of like unwind, decompress decompress and then join the family when they're ready. And so just kind of verbalizing to whomever you're with, whether you're living with or even at work, again, this idea of always being accessible, this idea that you should be able to be at maximum productivity at home because you have a laptop or you have a computer, so you should be like churning out all this work. And so I think, really communicating that this is as much as I can do, I can't deliver X, Y, and Z maybe until next week. I think we all really have to be very honest and open with our limitations. And so communication has been big for us in terms of coping.
Yeah, very important. Communicating your wants and needs. And we have a video on that, but I think you expressed everything that we covered in that video is just speaking, communicating it. Sometimes we do need that break. We need to step away. And that could be a coping skill in itself.
And interestingly, sometimes speaking or verbalizing things isn't easy for people. So other ways that you can do it is, especially with children, is I created like a little journal between my kids and I, where sometimes if they want to say something or they have something on their mind, if they're feeling something big with what's going on, they'll write it down and they'll leave the book on my bed. And they may not be ready to have that face-to-face conversation, but they want talk about this issue. They're having some big feelings. And so I'll read it and I'll just, write back and I'll give it back to them. And sometimes after a while, they're ready to do it face to face and sometimes they aren't. And I believe that even in relationships with couples, that could be helpful, whether you do it by text message, by way of letter, by way of email, or, doing the journal idea in the same way with kids. Sometimes some emotions are very intense and you don't want to necessarily get emotional when you're expressing how you're feeling. And this is kind of a way of doing it indirectly and getting your message across and opening up the channels to a face-to-face conversation. I'm definitely not saying, that you should avoid one-on-one conversations. Definitely not. But sometimes it isn't easy. So rather than internalize everything and not bring it up at all, this is kind of a gentle way to kind of ease into conversation or bring up maybe more difficult topics this way.
Yeah, I love it. That's a great exercise. I love everything you've shared today. I think that it just brings such an amazing insight and perspective for everybody watching and some amazing and helpful coping skills. So thank you so much for sharing all this with us.
Thank you so much for having me, Gabriel. And, I just want everybody out there to know that even us therapists, life coaches, whomever we may be, teachers, we have the same bad days as everybody else. And in the moment, we might look like we have all the answers and we have it together, but we really don't. We have the same stressful days and, we're vulnerable and we're people and we reach out to whomever we can reach out to. And we're not supposed to have it all together. None of us are. We're in a very unusual situation. We're not supposed to know how to navigate it. We're not supposed to have answers for everything. So I think just like lowering the expectation that we have, both of ourselves and of our family members and of the professionals around us, whether they're teachers or whomever they might be, we're all learning. It's new to all of us. And I think, just taking it easy and having that patience with each other and realizing that we're all doing our best.
Yeah, very well said. I say a lot that we're all having a normal reaction, normal feelings for a very abnormal situation and temporary situation. Hopefully shorter temporarily that we've been experiencing. Layla, if anybody that was watching wanted to connect with you, how would they reach you?
So I'm easily reached either through a message on my Instagram, which is Life Coach Layla, and or by email or telephone. On my Instagram, my email address is there, my number is there, and so I'm very easily reached that way.
Great. And I'll go ahead and link all that information below in the description. So if you want to get in touch with Layla, please do. She's an amazing life coach with such amazing insight and perspective, as you could see through this video. So if you want to get in touch with Layla, please do so. All of her contact information and a link to her Instagram will be in the description below. thank you once again, Layla Naji, for taking the time out of your busy schedule and balancing everything in your personal and professional life to meet with us via Zoom. Thank you so much for doing this interview with us.
Thank you very much for asking me, and thank you for all that you're doing to reach out to people. And, you know, hopefully everybody will do their bit to connect and reach out to each other, and we can all be there as a resource for each other. Thank you so much.
Thank you.